טוב לכל מי שנמצא איתנו, לי קוראים ורד, מה קרה למצגת? לי קוראים ורד, ואני ממרכז נגיש להכיר של עמותת לוטם, מי שמכיר, מי שכבר היה פה. אתה עוד לא היית איתנו, נכון? ערן. לא, אוקיי.
לא, זה יצא לי.
אוקיי, אז אני אגיד שאנחנו מרכז שעוסק בנושא של בעיקר באמת הדרכת נגישות למוזיאונים, אתרי תיירות, מרכזי מבקרים למיניהם, בכל מיני דרכים, זה דרך השתלמויות ופיתוח תכנים ופיתוח עזרי הדרכה. אנחנו בקרוב מתחילים קורס באמצע נובמבר, קורס של רכזי נגישות, שמיועד בדיוק לקהל הזה. רכז נגישות היא פונקציה שקיימת במוזיאון, באתר, שהיא על פי חוק צריכה להיות בעצם, וזה האדם שגם נותן את המענה ללקוחות, בכל מה שקשור לנגישות, אבל הוא גם עובד מול ההנהלה, ובעצם נותן את כל מה שקשור בהקשר הזה, זאת אומרת, הוא זה שמתכלל את כל נושא הנגישות, שם יעדים וסדרי עדיפויות, ובאמת זה קורס מאוד מאוד מקיף של 40 שעות, ואמור להיות 6 מפגשים כל פעם באתר אחר, מתוך רצון באמת להכיר לעומק את הנושא הזה של הנגישות. מי שמעניין שאני ארחיב ככה עוד. היום אנחנו נפגוש את אמה, שתדבר איתנו על נגישות ומה שנחמד במוזיאון היהודי, שהם עשו הרבה מאוד דברים יפים שקשורים לנגישות ובעלויות מאוד מאוד נמוכות. אם אני אקח את זה רגע אחורה, כשמדברים על אתר נגיש, יש שתי משמעויות לדבר, אם זה נגישות פיזית, ואם זה נגישות השירות, נגישות שירות ומידע. כשאנחנו מדברים על נגישות פיזית, אז מדובר על כל הרמפות והמעלונים והמעקי יד והשירותים, ואלה הדברים שעולים יותר כסף בדרך כלל, וכשאנחנו מדברים על נגישות שירות, אז שם כבר יש באמת רוחב הרבה יותר רציני ועמוק לדבר הזה, כשמדובר על באמת גם מענה טלפוני ואתר אינטרנט ומערכות שמע ותיאור קולי לאנשים עם לקויות ראייה והדרכה נגישה ובסוף הרבה מאוד דברים שקשורים לקשר בין בני אדם. ושם באמת יש המון המון מקום לעשות דברים בעלויות הרבה יותר נמוכות. זה הרבה קשור בהכשרה של הצוות, ביצירת גישה נכונה, תפיסה נכונה לכל מה שקשור לאנשים עם מוגבלויות בקליטה שלהם. ואני חושבת שזה הדבר המשמעותי שככה באמת הם תציג לנו. זה באמת דוגמאות להנגשה פיזית, אם זה עמדת הקליטה, ואם זה השביל גישה, ואם זה באמת הסימונים על הרצפה ללקויות ראייה. אבל הנגשת שירות אנחנו מדברים באמת על הרבה יותר דברים, ואני ארחיב ככה בהמשך אולי אחרי שהם תדבר, אבל אנחנו מדברים על תרגום לשפת הסימנים, אמרתי, תיאור קולי, וטקסט בשפה פשוטה, ובאמת מענה מדויק והובלה של אנשים אם צריך, או עזרה כשצריך. זה פרק הרבה יותר עמוס וככה משמעותי. זאת שני העלויות שלנו הרבה יותר נמוכות, בהשוואה להנגשה הפיזית, ואני רוצה ככה שבאמת היום נעמיק בזה יותר. So Emma, I was just talking about two sections that are related to accessibility in Israeli law and general, and one of them is talking about the physical accessibility, and the other one is talking about the service, an accessible service. And I said that I think that one of the nice things that you did is actually gave a much nicer, much better service, accessible service to people. And I will say that I was about 3 years ago, quite a long time now, in London, visiting there in different museums and meeting people who deal with accessible in the museum. And when I entered the Jewish museum, I was like so inspired because I saw very first of all I saw a big heart and a lot of wish to do as much as possible in order to have more and more visitors with disabilities. But the other the thing I saw there is a lot of creativity. a lot of different ideas of how to do it. And that's what Emma is going to talk about today, and about their approach to accessible photos, because I think they have an amazing approach. So now it's yours, Emma. And you're more than welcome. And good morning to whoever joined us in the last few days.
Thank you so much. I will just share my screen with you now. So thank you for inviting me to come and share with you this morning. So my name's Emma. I'm the Engagement Programme Manager at the Jewish Museum London, where I have worked for almost 4 years in various roles within the learning and engagement team. And throughout these different roles, I have worked on informal learning programmes. So this includes family activities, talks and tours, dementia-friendly workshops, and autism-friendly early openings. A big part of my role is access, and it is something I particularly enjoy, finding new ways to be creative and to make our museum accessible to more and more people. And in these 4 years, I feel as though I've learned a lot at the museum and continue to learn more. But there are 3 main things I would say that I have learned in this time that you will see are repeated themes throughout this talk. So number 1 is access doesn't need to cost a lot of money. Many of the resources and projects I will be talking about were actually not very expensive, but really do make a difference to visitors who come to our museum. Number 2, it's okay not to have all the answers. Ask the questions. None of us can know everything. If there is an audience you are hoping to welcome, you are hoping to create resources for a new group of people, well, who better to ask what might be helpful than that audience themselves? Or if not, other museum professionals who have worked with that audience before. None of us can know everything. We learn so much from each other. Evaluations, feedbacks, networks, partnerships are all valuable in improving access. And number 3, do something rather than nothing. This is a wonderful piece of advice I had from an external consultant. She said that so often people were worried about not getting access completely right, that they didn't do anything for fear of getting it wrong. As she said, it's much better to offer something. Yes, maybe make some mistakes, but through this improve and offer more, rather than offering nothing at all out of some worry of getting it wrong. So throughout this talk this morning, I will share with you projects and programs that we run at the Jewish Museum and share ways that we work to make our museum more accessible. So let's have a look at a picture of our beautiful museum building. I normally start a talk by asking if anybody has visited the Jewish Museum before. I'm quite interested to see if anybody has actually. If you have, would you be able to give me a wave or perhaps write in the chat if anybody's come to our museum? Doesn't look like it. So we've got the one, of course, thank you. If you ever are in London, you are very welcome. But I would like to therefore begin by sharing a little bit about who we are as a museum. So we were founded back in 1932 by Professor Cecil Roth, Alfred Rubens and Wilfred Samuel. We were originally located in Woburn House in Bloomsbury, with the first collection focused solely on items of Judaica. We then merged with the Finchley-based London Museum of Jewish Life in the 1990s. And so a wide range of artifacts relating to the social history of Jewish people in Britain was added to our collection. As a result of the merger of these museums to form today's Jewish Museum, we have a very rich and varied collection. Our collection now totals around 40,000 objects, which cover about 1,500 years of Jewish history in this country. However, we are faced with the same issue that faces, I would say, many museums around the world, which is a limited amount of space to display our collection. Less than 5% of our collection is on display. So as well as in our galleries, our stores are also packed with interesting objects about thousands of years of Jewish history. Around 90% of our visitors are not Jewish, so the vast majority, and they are interested in finding out more about the Jewish faith, and yes, in some instances, learning about it for the first time. We exist for all people from all backgrounds, and we celebrate diversity in all its forms. We are really working hard to improve how we tell the story of underrepresented groups. So women's stories, stories of Black Jewish communities, Sephardi and Mizrahi communities, and LGBTQ plus Jewish stories. Our mission is to surprise, delight, and engage all people, irrespective of background and faith, in the history, identity, and culture of Jewish people in Britain. And our programs encourage a sense of discovery. They aim to provoke questions, to challenge prejudice, and encourage understanding. With inclusion and being a place for all, really at the heart of our mission and our values, accessibility is fundamental to what we do. This is something I really value about the museum's approach to access. It is not something that is added on later or a separate program. Instead, it is a core part of our offer. We have 2 permanent galleries. Our first one you can see here is Judaism, a Living Faith. We chose that name because whilst many of the objects are historic, including at the back, perhaps the most popular object in the gallery, our 17th century Italian ark. However, whilst these are historic, Judaism is not. It is still lived and practiced by many people around the globe. And that sort of reflects the dual nature of our museum. At one point telling about a very long history of Jewish people in Britain, but on the other hand, sharing practices and cultures that are still being practiced today. Our second permanent gallery is History, a British Story, which tells the story of the Jewish community in London from 1066 up to the second half of the 20th century. Now, in both these galleries, there are family-friendly resources, objects for people to touch, interactives that engage different senses. And I've chosen a couple of my favorites to share with you. Perhaps my favorite of all of them is our Shabbat table, which was in our gallery, Judaism, a Living Faith. This is laid out with objects that you might find at a family Shabbat table. You can see in the center, we've got some fake candlesticks and these flicker. Underneath the challah cover, there are some fake challah loaves that you can feel. There's also the sounds playing of a family's celebration. You might be thinking this looks a little dark in this image. That is because the light in this space changes. So you can sort of follow through night falling and then morning coming and Shabbat ending. So you sort of go through the whole cycle of a family Shabbat and you hear the different sounds of it all. And it is a very popular area with children and adults alike. Then we have our Judaism gallery. Apologies for the quality of this photo, sorry, our history gallery. Here, there is a section all about tailoring, and there are different tools that might be used in the tailoring trade that children and adults can feel. You can also have a go at lifting a tailor's iron and seeing how heavy it is. We also in this gallery have a recreated Jewish East End kitchen, which has got some fake challah. You can have a go at plaiting, and also it's got a cooking pot on the stove that if you lift it, you can smell chicken soup. So they're really trying to bring in all the different senses in this area. And these are just some of more interactives. They were put in place over 10 years ago now when our museum reopened in 2010. And for me, they demonstrate how effective it is when access is at the heart of programs rather than added on as an extra later. When these galleries were designed, you can see that they thought about families. They thought about accessibility for people who might struggle to read text panels or to connect with objects that are behind glass. It's so helpful to have these as part of our permanent offering. There are many different events and activities we offer, but we do want every visitor who comes, whether they attend an event or not, to feel welcome and provided for. Now, for some visitors who come to our museum, it is easier and more accessible to come to a specific event. And I would like to turn to one of these events now. It is our dedicated early openings for children with autism and their families. This is Curious Explorers. And I should say it's also open to children with other social communication conditions. This programme has been running for over 5 years now and takes place during the school holidays. When we launched this programme, we reached out to families with a child with autism or ASC to ask when they would like these sessions, which goes back to one of my three main points earlier. It's okay not to have all the answers, ask. There was no point us creating something and then finding it wasn't when people wanted it. So feedback we received from families was that whilst they could find activities on weekends to take their children to, one difficulty was finding something during the weekdays of school holidays. With this in mind, we launched this programme on the Wednesdays of school holidays, such as October half term or February half term. My colleague who launched this programme also met with staff from other London museums who ran early openings for children with autism and observed the events that they ran, which was really helpful in getting ideas to set up our programme. And it's one that I now coordinate. Curious Explorers sits as part of our wider family programme. And our theme for the events links to our theme for family programming and for different school holidays. So, for example, they've been themed around Jewish festivals, around the seasons, or around temporary exhibitions. One thing in these that we share with other museums is that we do not know what the particular needs of a child will be before they arrive. Children with ASC can have such varying needs. Whilst there are, of course, some children we have come to know through them regularly attending, there are always new children who attend, and their needs are different. Some children are sensory seeking, some are sensory avoiding. Some like to interact with staff members, some like to be by themselves. So with this in mind, we try to make sure we have a range of different types of activities at each event. We have one quiet activity, one sensory activity, one logical and ordered activity, one creative activity, and one object handling that really allows students to share their own knowledge and learn more about the collection. We also always have a quiet space where children can go. This has cushions, it has storybooks, sometimes colouring sheets and Lego. And we always have a sensory space. So a recent one was on the theme of the environment. We had twigs, fake grass, pieces of bark, different types of fake leaves, dried lavender, and it was very popular. Logical activities have included mosaic making and about me activity charts. Also includes sort of creating models, which needs all the parts to be fitted in a set order. Creative activities include painting with sticks, sand art, making clay models. For object handling, we've explored different objects in our handling collection, often ones linked to different Jewish festivals such as Shabbat. Each Curious Explorers also includes an activity trail to encourage children and their families to explore the galleries. The cost for these events is relatively low, the main cost being staff time in organising and running these events. The activities themselves do not actually cost much, and the more we run, the lower the cost becomes as we start to build up more reusable resources. So, for example, items that we use in the sensory space, there was an initial cost, but many of them we've been able to reuse. We've also managed to do some very low budget activities. A popular one I mentioned before was twig art, where children use twigs instead of paintbrushes to make pictures. We went out and collected twigs ourselves from the streets around our museum. And we used some of our existing stock of paint and paper, meaning we actually spent no money at all on that activity. As you can see in this room, our activities take place in our learning spaces, but we want to make it very clear that the galleries are very much for the families as well. We want children to feel confident in these spaces, which is why we always include an activity trail and encourage families to go up into the galleries as well. Curious Explorers takes place when the museum is closed, but we also encourage families that they're welcome to stay past 10 o'clock when we open. We hope that as children become more confident visiting the museum when we're closed, they will become more confident visiting when we're open. Before working at the Jewish Museum, I was organising similar events at the Museum of London. And I would like to share a couple of things I've learned along the way through both these experiences and various training I've done, things that I find really helpful in planning these events. Firstly, there is a stereotype that you may well be aware of that children with autism do not play, or at least do not play well. And this is, of course, not true. Children with autism do play, they just might do it differently. Children with autism have a logical, structured view of the world, and their play tends to reflect that. This gives them control over their play, and it follows a neat order. So find activities where children can be logical and can have control. For example, mosaic making is very popular because it is ordered, it's logical, it's controlled. Playing with other children can be difficult for someone with autism, as it means they lose control and the play can change. So activities where a child can do lone play or alongside play rather than a group activity is really helpful. Children can still interact with each other, can still feel part of a group, even if they're each working on their own separate item. Not all children who come to the museum for one of these sessions wants to interact. Some find that very intimidating. So sometimes we find it's very helpful to just let a child sit at the table by themselves and do an activity. It can feel like you're neglecting them, so leave them alone, but it can actually show a good understanding of autism to be ready to take a step back. And the child and the family can really appreciate it. So another way of doing this is when we have a child start to do an activity, we might want to sit by them and perhaps do an example of the activity ourselves. And gradually, rather than asking lots of questions, which are not so helpful for children with autism, use statements that might not necessarily require a response. They're more relaxing and can help the child take the lead. Generally, the rule is 5 statements to a question when doing any kind of family activity. For a non-neurotypical child, this can be even less questions. So I always sit down, make my own piece of art, might do it silently if I feel this is what the child needs. Then I might gradually start making some statements. Oh, I think I'm going to make this for my friend. Then I could start to add in some open-ended statements that could become a question, sort of, I wonder what animal I could draw on this. I wonder what colour this flower should be. And that can test if the child is ready and willing to interact. For example, one child who came and didn't speak to any of us, when I started to say, I wonder what colour I should draw this next, she picked up a pink pen and passed it to me. It was all non-verbal, but a good way to start an interaction. And then gradually a child might start to feel more comfortable communicating with you. But do be prepared to communicate non-verbally. Why should we expect people to be verbal when it isn't their easiest method to communicate? Follow the lead of the child. Be prepared to be silly and make a mess. One activity, you sometimes need to adapt it. I remember in the sensory space, one thing a boy connected with really well was just throwing lots of leaves up in the air and on the floor. It can be messy, it can be silly. Be prepared to adapt and to accommodate, but most of all, do something. It's so easy to worry about getting it right that we are wary of doing anything. Having autism-friendly events alone goes a long way to making people feel welcome and included. And people are very understanding and appreciative. And as you do more, you will learn more and constantly feel like you're improving, as I am still improving and learning more. In describing our Curious Explorers program, I have referred to our family program. We run family activities during school holidays and on some weekends. And you can see a photograph from one of our family festivals here, where they are decorating notebooks with autumn leaves and autumn patterns. This summer, we were very excited to be able to run our first in-person family event at the museum since February 2020. It's quite a long time. We have been doing some virtual family events and festivals since then, but it was lovely to see families back on site. We welcomed families to bake challah bread and to take part in arts and crafts, object handling, and an activity trail. Baking is something we've included in family activities before, and it proves to be very popular. It's a very sensory, a very tactile experience. But we also like it because it's an activity that encourages the whole family to work together. As opposed to some craft activities, as you can sort of see in this picture here, and may well be familiar to you, this type of activity, the child will do the activity to make their own example. And the parent, as we can see here, might interact with them, but is less likely to be doing the activity with them. And in some cases, you might see that the child does the activity while the parent starts to have a little look around the galleries or is on their phone or something else, for example. With baking, we were really pleased to see that all the adults who came were doing the activity with the children. And it was the type of activity where they could share their skills and their knowledge and sort of guide the child through it. So it created some lovely interaction and was really effective in sort of creating these new memories between these families. Our two most popular family days are our Mitzvah Family Day, which always coincides with Interfaith Week. And we've often included baking in that again, where families make challah, and they will often make 2 loaves, one to take home and one to donate to a local homeless shelter. The other is our Hanukkah Family Day, which I'm starting work preparing now. And at this, children have made their own clay lamps, made their own candles, and it always is timed to fit in around our daily candle lighting that we hold throughout Hanukkah. The next resource that I would like to share with you is something from our schools program rather than our family program. And these are our Access for All trolleys. So as well as hosting events, we also want to have resources that are available to make visits as accessible as possible. We have one of these in each of our 2 teaching spaces, and they are available in every school workshop. They contain resources to help make our workshops more accessible for students with additional needs. This came because when we reviewed our feedback from our existing workshops, we found that one thing we wanted to improve was accessibility. Now, to do this, I went back through previous evaluation forms from teachers to look at what the additional needs were of pupils currently visiting, because this was information we'd been gathering. We found that autism, ASC, and global delay were the most frequent needs. So we were particularly keen to provide resources for students with those needs. We also found we were having many visits from students with ADHD, dyslexia, and visual impairment. And we also found that several schools were bringing pupils who had English as a second language. So designing these access trolleys, we wanted to make sure that there were resources that would cater to different needs, particularly thinking of the needs that I have mentioned. The bags also include tote bags. You can see one here. So students can put any resources that they want into the bag to take it with them throughout their visit, into the galleries, into different activities and workshops, and return the resources at the end of the session. Now, of course, our big issue, our big thing we're thinking about was what resources to include. Now, our budget was not the highest for this, so we wanted to make it useful and cost effective. So we debated whether to spend our money on larger, more expensive resources that teachers might not be able to bring with them on the day, or providing cheaper, smaller resources that we could purchase more of, but perhaps teachers and students would be more likely to bring with them anyway. We tried to go for a combination of the two, a balance, to provide a variety of different types of resources. So Objects that we included were things like reading rulers, ear defenders, pencil grips, weighted blankets, pop-up concentration desk, and a textured backrest. We also included sensory objects to fit into the different workshops. So we had LED candles that would flicker. We had smell boxes with different smells that might be relevant to the sessions. So we had smell boxes with apple scents and honey scents for our Rosh Hashanah workshop. We had smell boxes that were meant to smell like a 19th century street for our Jewish East End workshops. We tried to have a big mix of different types of things. We did a survey with teachers afterwards, and feedback was positive, with teachers saying that it made their visit more accessible, or that it showed that the museum was more openly accessible to all people. A key finding was that teachers want access resources available, even if their students don't need them. For example, one teacher in her evaluation, whose school did not use the trolley, answered that it made her feel more confident in her visit, and that she felt it was necessary for students to see these resources, even if they weren't needed. Different teachers chose different resources to be the most helpful one for their visit, showing that there was no one resource that was more helpful than any other. As one teacher wrote, the most helpful thing seemed to be variety, because special needs are always different. The location of the trolleys is really important. After feedback that students were hesitant to go to the front of the class to pick up these resources, they're now located at the back of the teaching spaces, making it more subtle when students go to collect a resource.
Okay, can I add something? I just want to say that in London, not as in Israel, groups from schools come with the teacher, and then the teacher guides in the museum, right? It's not your guide usually. That's correct? Sorry,
would you say that again for me?
I said that usually the teachers are the guides in the museum, right? It's not that, it's usually not your guides, right?
If they come for a school workshop, then members of our learning team will lead sessions for them and also take them into the galleries. But they can also come for a self-directed visit where the teachers just take them around the galleries themselves. Mm-hmm. So we felt it was really important to do this evaluation because it goes back to my earlier point of it being okay not to have all the answers. Teachers knew what their students needed very well. And we found this survey with teachers very helpful and were able to make this change of moving where they were located based on feedback from teachers. Another thing that came across is how important it is to tell people what access resources you've got. We were trying to promote it to people before their visit. And so they were advertised on our website. We emailed teachers about them beforehand. But teachers were so busy, we found that many of them hadn't had time to read this information. So it was very important when they arrived at the museum that we told them what resources we had. So those were resources for school children. We also have resources available for families who are visiting our museum. We have an activity zone on the upper ground floor. Now, this space has colouring and activity sheets for children to fill in. These are regularly updated, and there are always 4 different activity sheets that children can do. They are often themed around the time of year. So you might see Purim themed activity trails and then followed by Passover themed activities. And they can also be designed around our exhibitions or our museum's permanent displays. One of our most popular objects on display, and also one of our largest, is the 17th century Italian ark I showed you earlier. And we have a colouring sheet for this, which can be very popular. In this same area, we also have rugs and cushions where families can take a break and relax. There are also many storybooks that children and their families can read. These come from PJ Library, an organisation that you may well be familiar with, as I believe they're also based in Israel. These books are for different reading ages, and this space can be used as a quiet space for families to relax in. alongside having dedicated family events and festivals, it's really nice to be able to provide activities that are always available for family groups. We also have backpacks that can be borrowed for the length of a visit. These contain activities that children can do in the galleries, such as scent bags to smell, craft activities to have a go at, and replica objects to explore. Each of these resources I mentioned are quite low cost to provide. Colouring sheets simply require the staff time to create and the printing costs of printing in black and white on A4 paper. Although having said that, we now have such a reserve of multiple activities for different seasons and festivals. It's more just a case of going in and printing some to restock them. Backpacks, we needed the initial funding to be able to create, but once we've got them, they just need to be replenished very occasionally, and that's rare and quite low cost. Yet having these resources makes a big difference to the experiences of the families who visit our museum. I'd now like to turn to our website. So I'm just going to stop this share and share my screen again. Here we go. So obviously the website is often the first thing people will encounter. I saw in a recent survey that 76% of us will research a place online before visiting. And I expect this figure is even higher for people with access needs who might need to find certain information to check that they are able to visit. So on our website, we have a dedicated page for access with helpful information about what we provide. The text on this is black text on a white background to try to make it as accessible as possible to read. And it's laid out by different themes and also by different types of access needs. We also have on our website a visual story, sometimes known as a visit story. It's something you may have come across before. These are to help people prepare for their visit. It contains many pictures and information about what to expect here. It includes who you might meet and what the process might be for entering the museum, and also things that people with different access needs might need to know. So it will tell you where you might see changes in lighting level, where you might have some background noise, where and when areas of the museum might be busy, what the stairs look like, what the lifts look like, where you can find the toilets, where you can touch things, where you can hear things. And it is intended to be helpful, particularly for any visitors with autism, but also anyone who's looking for more information to be able to plan their visit. Now, having created a visual story for general visitors to the museum, we also felt it was important to create a visual story for school groups as well, because often their experience could be quite different. And so with that in mind, and also this was around the time we created the access trolleys, we felt there needed to be a separate dedicated page for schools for access, which you can see here. This includes the access for all trolleys, information where people can get in touch if they've got any questions about their visit, and also a second visual story, one for primary and one for secondary schools, with language that's age appropriate for both. And you can see, while some of it is similar, it includes more learning specific information. So who they might meet, who might be teaching their session, information about some of the education spaces where they might have their sessions, and what to expect in the different school workshops. So I would say the most challenging part of creating these is not what to include, but what to not include. People's needs are so different. When we went round the different spaces of the museum to look at what to include, we were coming up with so much information that we would have created a very long document, many pages long, that might not have been so helpful because it would have been so dense. So We were conscious that if we included everything, it would be overwhelming. We wanted to find the balance between the two extremes, including the information we felt would be most helpful, but also not putting in a difficult amount of text to read. This is a resource that is very low cost, but it is one that is very helpful to visitors to have, to allow them to make the decision of whether this museum is accessible for them to be able to visit. I'm conscious of time. I just want to finish very quickly before handing over to your questions by saying that I've talked a lot about programs and resources that are visible for people to be able to see and interact with. But a lot of what we do to make our museum accessible is done behind the scenes. And the most important example of this, I would say, is staff training. So often staff and volunteers are really keen to be welcoming and friendly to everyone. But if you don't know what to do, sometimes we can make it worse rather than better. For example, I was once at another museum's early opening for children with autism. And when a child with autism arrived who was overwhelmed by their visit to the museum, they had a meltdown. A very friendly volunteer interpreted this as a child being upset and in need of distraction, rather than understanding that children with autism can have a meltdown. She tried to distract the child, bending down close to him and holding up activities he could do. It was an extremely kind thing that she was doing, but this child was having a meltdown. He was overwhelmed by sensory stimulus. What he really needed was to be left alone, to have a quiet space free from stimulus and people looking at him. He became so distressed by this interaction that the meltdown worsened, and the family ended up leaving before doing any of the activities. Now, this volunteer was being extremely kind. I've seen her volunteer in many family events, and she is excellent with children, but she'd never been trained or had any training about children with autism. Whilst offering information online and specific events for people with different access needs, not just autism, is great, it's really important that staff and volunteers doing this are given the training that they need to welcome people with different needs. Whilst there are many dedicated staff who organise and run these events and write content for the website, these will not be the only people visitors meet. In fact, if someone just does a sort of self-directed visit around a museum, they may not meet the one person who leads on such events at all. So it's helpful if the people that they come into contact with do receive training on accessibility. At the Jewish Museum, we've received training on autism awareness. As the staff member who works most closely on access programs, I have attended additional training events and conferences, and in turn, I have run autism awareness training for colleagues and for volunteers. We also have had staff from all departments attend dyslexia and dyspraxia training, and for this we created a list of actions we could do across the museum to continue to improve our accessibility. We also use these training sessions as a chance to have someone external review what we currently offer and get external feedbacks on our projects. It's something that I found extremely helpful, and I think that our museum is more accessible because of the amount of time we dedicate to training, to learning more and improving. So this has just been a very quick snapshot into the work we do on accessibility at the Jewish Museum London. And I would now like to hand it over to you if you have any questions for me.
Oh, I wanted to ask, I know some dementia programs for people with dementia.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a few words about that?
Yes, so that's our Curious Minds program. Sorry, so many things, not time to mention all of them. So in this, we go out to care homes, taking some of our handling collection with us, and we run reminiscence sessions designed to spark memory on different topics. So the Jewish East End is very popular. We also do celebrations of different festivals and school days. We can also welcome visitors with dementia to our museum and do a dementia-friendly highlights tour for them, or our workshops or activities in person. Obviously, we had to pause going into care homes, but during the pandemic, we have done sessions for care homes or dementia cafes over Zoom. So done some virtual ones in the meantime.
Shmuel, are you with us? I know you wanted to ask a question. Well, okay. Does anyone have some more questions? Okay. Well, Shmuel wrote that he will ask in a minute. Okay. But I think your ideas are amazing and are so easy to create. You know, it's not like something too complicated. For example, this visual story. I saw only one site in Israel that has that visual story, and it's something so simple to create. And give so much information for people with disabilities, but also for families that don't have any child with a disability and just want to get information, you know. And something that is really easy to create. Or the backpacks. I know you have those bags as the backpacks, but now you saw this. You show these trolleys, and that's a very nice, good idea that I didn't. Well, I didn't see that yet. Actually, I was trying to create it in one of the sites I work with, but I never saw that before. So it's great to know that it's here. Okay, Shmuel, I see he wants to ask a question. Hello.
יש לי שאלה, האמת שאני לא כל כך הבנתי איך העגלות האלה עובדות, כאילו מה...
Can you explain a bit more about these trolleys? Because there is a question about how it works and what is inside of it and who actually use it.
The visual story.
Oh, no, the trolleys.
Oh, the trolleys, yes. So they're for every school who comes to visit. So whilst you might have specific schools for children with additional needs, many mainstream schools will have a few pupils in each class who do have access needs. So you might have some children who are dyslexic, who are dyspraxic, who have autism, ADHD, or some kind of visual impairment. So when they come into our school workshop, at the start, they're invited to take any resource out of the trolley that they might need to help them. So a child with ADHD might want some kind of fidget toy or hand massager or a weighted neck cushion or a weighted blanket to help them concentrate. You might have a child with some kind of visual impairment, wants to have a magnifying sheet, wants to have coloured coloured reading ruler to help them follow their worksheet through. You might find that a child who is dyspraxic would like to have a pencil grip to help them, or a slanted writing pane to help them write through the session. And you might find that a child with a global delay who is nonverbal and who might struggle with information that is spoken to them or written down, might find it's very helpful to have a sensory resource. So when talking about writing the Torah with quills, it might be helpful to learn about that whilst holding one of the long feathers that we've got in our collection, or who might find when learning about the festivals, it's helpful to like smell what the festival might be like, so you get the information in a non-verbal way. And they can take those resources around throughout the workshop and then return them at the end. But we never label the objects in the trolleys. We never say, right, these ones are for the children with dyslexia. These are for the children with ADHD. Any child can choose any resource, regardless of whether they have a known additional need or not.
Now I can talk.
Yes, go ahead, Shmuel.
You hear me, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to ask you if you can to expand about adaptation of Jewish Museum of London to visit of people with mental disabilities and disabilities of coordination disorders. If this museum adopted to visit of those two groups of visitors.
Do you have any like tips to guide people with mental disabilities?
So as in sort of mental health issues. So I recently did a pilot activity with a local charity, Jamie. They're a Jewish mental health charity. And we ran we ran 2 workshops for their participants, and they were designed to help people with anxieties to return to public spaces after the pandemic. So we worked closely with Jamie to design the events, and we made them very sensory in nature. We had them in a sort of private separate room, and we ran them when the museum was closed to general visitors. In these sessions, they were focused around Shabbat, because we felt that Shabbat was something that many of these people had experience of themselves, and is also a very sensory festival. So they were able to handle spice boxes, not just from our handling collection, but from our collection, and see what information they could discover about them through handling them. Then we had different spices on the tables that they could smell and see what they made them think of, what memories they brought back, what their favorite smells were. And with these different spices, we could each create our own tea bag and our own scent bag to take home. And then we had the option of an optional creative activity and time to explore the galleries as well. So it's something that we've definitely been starting to work on, and is really interesting. And what I should say as well is, in terms of mental health, we feel it's really important not just to be there for visitors, but also to be there for staff and volunteers. And many members of our team are mental health first aiders, and we're actually doing refresher training for that on Friday. And so we run regular weekly activities for staff members for mental health, which is our Wellbeing Wednesdays that we do. And we also have signage up when we've had events where the subject matter could be slightly triggering for some people. For example, when we had our exhibition on the artwork of Carlotta Salomon, who you may have come across, a fabulous artist who was murdered in the Holocaust and had a life experience of members of her family completing suicide. We had signs up letting people know that there were mental health first aiders in the building who would be able to come and speak to them if they needed to. So it's something that we are working on as well.
Okay. Emma, thank you very much. Really, I really like the ideas you have, and I have to visit your place again.
Thank you.
I will move to Hebrew again, okay? Last words. It's so much easier for me. אני רוצה באמת להזכיר כמה דברים. זאת אומרת, אחד מהדברים שקשורים בערכות החושיות למשל, מאפשר להכניס כל מיני אמצעים. זה יכול להיות סמלי תקשורת שהם רלוונטיים ומאפשרים למי שלא יכול לדבר עם סמלים, וזה משהו שאפשר גם עליו להרחיב עוד את הדיבור. זה יכול להיות באמת דברים חושיים כמו מודלים קטנים, רפליקות או ריחות שונים. זה יכול להיות זכוכיות מגדלת או מכשיר שמע שיש בו קולות שקשורים למשהו, או חלק משיר למשל, או שירים שקשורים לנושא, שיכולים לגרות ולהתאים לילדים מסוימים. זה יכול להיות משחקים, פאזל למשל שקשור לנושא שאנחנו מדברים עליו, או לא יודעת מה, מין חידון כזה שאני צריך להוריד כל פעם חלק מהתמונה ולגלות משהו. הרעיון הוא בעצם לייצר מגוון של אפשרויות שנמצאות בתוך קופסה או תיק או טרולי, לא משנה, שבעצם ייתן את המענה לילדים שונים שצריכים רגע להרגיע את עצמם, שצריכים רגע לשקט, או שהמורה רוצה להפעיל אותם, או שהמדריך רוצה לעזר בהם. ואפשר לחשוב באמת ולהוסיף לזה עוד המון דברים, זה ככה ממש על קצה המזלג. אני אגיד שהרעיונות פה הם מקסימים, זה באמת יצירת אירועים מיוחדים בשעות מוקדמות או מאוחרות של המוזיאון, ואם זה באמת מידע שנותנים למבקרים, ואם זה הנושא של הכשרת הצוותים, שהוא בעיניי הדבר המשמעותי ביותר, ומשם הרבה פעמים צריך להתחיל. ועוד דבר אחד זה שנגיד ככה לסיכום, שאם מישהו יש לו שאלות או דברים שתרצו לדעת, אז אתם כמובן ממש מוזמנים לפנות, ואני שמה פה עוד פעם את הכתובת והמידע עלינו. ומזכירה שוב שמי שמעניין אותו, אנחנו פותחים קורס של רכזי נגישות במוזיאונים בסוף החודש. I want to thank you again, Emma, for your time and even for your wish to join it and to share your ideas. I think that what you said about sharing information is the most important thing. And I jealous London because they do it so nicely. And you share information, and I think it's for the best for everyone. And I hope we will do more of that in Israel. And I also like the idea that there is the option to open the museum earlier. And that's something I try to create now in a lot of museums in Israel. And so the people, so the families with special needs will know on which day or on which weekend, which museum is open for them. And they will have a lot of options. Right now, it's not the situation in Israel, but I hope it will be there. We will be there soon.
Mm-hmm.
So much. Thank you so much for the time and for the inspiration. And I hope to be in touch soon.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come along and share.
תודה לכולם, נפגש שוב בעוד שבועיים עם שמוליק שניידר, שהוא בחור שמתנהל בכיסא גלגלים, וככה נשמע ממנו קצת מהעולם האישי שלו. תודה.
תודה רבה.